From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's what's ahead. During our first half hour today, a conversation with K-State's Alan Featherstone and Mykel Taylor. They'll talk about their new article on the state of the Kansas farm economy entitled Navigating Rough Waters. They'll discuss the factors that are most greatly influencing the economic condition of production agriculture currently in Kansas, and they'll offer their thoughts on how 2020 might shape up economically for you Kansas producers. We'll have today's agricultural news headlines for you, as usual, and on this week's K-State Horticulture segment, Dennis Patton will offer some guidelines for planning springtime improvements to the home landscape. All that coming right up on this Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Welcome back to another Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. Good to have you aboard on this Thursday. It's a topical matter no matter what time of year, and that is the state of the Kansas farm economy. So many variables in motion any given time. It's hard to stay on top of it all, but there's an interesting perspective on the condition of that economy, posted now in a new article out of the Agricultural Economics Department here at Kansas State University. It's on the agmanager.info website, incidentally. It is called The Kansas Farm Economy, Navigating Rough Waters. And the co-authors are with us now, agricultural economists Alan Featherstone and Mykel Taylor. Alan, what was the inspiration behind the analysis that you and Mykel did here?
Over the last few months, there's been quite a bit of press nationwide with regards to concerns about the Kansas farm economy. And certainly people that work in the Kansas economy, such as bankers, such as retailers that work with farmers, certainly have a concern. And in some respects, part of this concern has come from states further east of here. For example, if you look at Illinois, doing some analysis that I've done there, their gross farm income on the crop side is down about 15%. And so the question is where is Kansas in this situation? And so that certainly led to a need to pull this together and try to give a response to the constituents in Kansas with regards to where the economy has been over the last couple of years and where it may be headed in 2020.
Well, in going after that then, Mykel, what benchmarks, so to say, did you and Alan use in assessing the state of the Kansas farm economy?
Well, we looked primarily at net farm income and land values, because land tends to reflect the profitability in the ag sector over the long run. And so just keeping track of where land values have been and how they've been changing over the last few years is an important marker for how things are evolving in the farm economy.
All right. Well, what is the story there then? Land values certainly hit an apex a few years ago, but they've come back down then?
Well, what we've seen is the peak of land values came in about 2015. And what we've seen since then is a drop-off of about 20% statewide in land values. Now, that seems like a big number, and it's certainly not something that we should minimize too much, but we had a really big run-up in land values with high commodity prices over the period from 2008 to 2014. So we've backed off a little bit. The other thing that we're looking at then is just land sales from the first 3 quarters of 2019, which is not a complete selling year, and fourth quarter sales do tend to be stronger than the rest of the year. But we've seen another drop-off of anywhere between 5 to 7% between 2018 and 2019 statewide.
Now, the drop-off in land values, you say, is not uniform across the state, so that needs to be considered here?
Right. So land markets are very localized, and you can have a variety of different things going on. What we're trying to measure is the impact on agricultural land from agricultural uses. And so we do see a weakening of the market in, say, southwest Kansas relative to northeast Kansas because the productivity of the land in northeast Kansas is higher. But you also, people will talk about local land markets still having some resiliency because of non-ag uses, maybe wind turbines, maybe hunting leases, some things like that. So if you're close to Wichita or you're close to the Kansas City area, you might have some non-ag uses for development purposes that are keeping land values strong. But when you're out in the part of the rural Kansas that doesn't have much for non-ag uses, agriculture is what's driving that market.
So, Alan, as Mykel said, land values have dropped around 20% from 2015 to 2018, but there has been something of a leveling off, having to do, you say, with lower interest rates.
Yeah, certainly the interest rates, the level of interest rates have probably sustained land values much more than perhaps most thought. And if you look kind of at the expectations on increasing interest rates, it seems to be dampening with regards to where we are from economy perspective and the trade perspective. While that now has a little bit more uncertainty, certainly the coronavirus issue in China, I think, is also potentially going to slow the global economy a bit. And so I think the outlook for interest rates continues to be fairly favorable from a borrower perspective, especially an agricultural borrower perspective. I think there are still opportunities to borrow at a pretty favorable rate, at least from a historical perspective.
Once more, though, you and Mykel weaved in here in this analysis the net farm income trends of the past several years, and just remind us of where those have been.
In terms of at the beginning, kind of the 2010 to 2014 period, we were up above 128,000, 129,000 from Kansas farm management data every year. From 2014 to 2015, it dropped from 129,000 to 7,000. And so certainly that was a big shock to the system. And then after 2015, it's gradually recovered to roughly 47,000 in 2016, 67,000 in 2017. And in 2018, it was right at 100,000. And so we have some increase there. But a lot of that, especially 2018, and as we look at where the 2019 number will be, is because of the MFP payments.
And really, that is the nugget that needs to be remembered here. So much of the percentage of that net farm income the last year or so has been in government payments in total, the MFP payments in particular. In the absence of those, it would be a more troublesome scenario.
Yeah, certainly that's the case, and I think that leads to some unease as we go into 2020 and look at the income prospects. But just to give an example, the average MFP payment for our Kansas farm management farmers was right at $38,000 in 2018, and so if you take the 100 minus 38, you're kind of down at a $62,000 net farm income. And then if you look at 2019, and I think the last payment from the 2019 program will be made, but three-quarters has already been made. But we estimate from some research in the department that the average payment for 2019 will be roughly $58,000. And so those are numbers high enough that can really swing just the financial well-being of individual farms.
And this may be something that falls into the category of an outside observation beyond the analysis, but how would you two perceive the lending community is looking at all of this? Is there an uneasiness there, therefore creating some potential for rough waters for producers?
In some respects, I think there is some unease in terms of, again, even though agriculture was very good in Kansas in terms of the gross farm income in Kansas was actually up 14 to 15%, at least using USDA expected yields, according to the last report. And so we may be looking at a pretty good number of 115,000 or above for an average for the state of Kansas in 2019. I think the real concern is maybe twofold in terms of one is what type of decisions did producers make at the end of 2019 with regards to machinery purchases, or whether or not they just were going to keep that cash on the balance sheet, perhaps pay a little bit more in taxes, but position themselves with a little bit more liquidity going into perhaps a 2020, 2021 that could be a little bit more difficult. And then the other thing going there, while we have resolution with regards to the USMCA, and it appears we've made progress with Japan and China, the big thing is how quickly our market price is going to snap back from the current levels. And again, the global price is set by supply and demand, and certainly the supply has been very good by favorable weather from a global perspective over the last few years. I think there's concern with regards to what's going on with regards to China, both on the hog side and then with the coronavirus aspect with regards to what is that going to do for the demand potential for agricultural products within the Asia region, but also more globally.
And, Mykel, you communicate with lenders fairly frequently because you work directly and constantly with land value issues. So thoughts on that as well?
Well, when we had our Ag Lenders Conference in October, I did a informal survey of the lenders, asking them about their portfolios and what proportion of their loan portfolio they considered to be vulnerable. I didn't define vulnerable. I just said, give me your impressions. And while I was expecting numbers between 5 and 10%, we got numbers between 25 and 35% from their responses. And so I see them being concerned about portions of their loan portfolio and looking at doing a fair amount of restructuring of loans in order to get folks caught up, because we have a cash flow issue, is really what's going on here, and trying to get them to where they can roll those notes over into something that they can afford to make payments on in the short run has been a key part of helping them out on the lending side.
Let's talk more about this after the break. If we might, we're visiting with K-State agricultural economists Mykel Taylor and Alan Featherstone upon them writing up a new analysis on the Kansas farm economy titled Navigating Rough Waters. We'll return with Alan and Mykel after this over the K-State Radio Network. This is Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Agriculture Today continues now as we're glancing at the condition of the Kansas farm economy through the viewpoints of an article that was recently posted on the agmanager.info website out of K-State Agricultural Economics entitled The Kansas Farm Economy, Navigating Rough Waters. Alan Featherstone and Mykel Taylor, the co-authors of this, and they're Mike's side with us once again. So when we look ahead to 2020, the prospects for the economy, Alan, as you hinted at in the article, there are some optimistic tones to that.
Certainly there are, and I think just resolving some of the uncertainty with regards to the trading partners is a positive aspect. And with the initial first-round agreement with China, if parties live up to the agreements that they've signed, there could be lots of opportunity to trade and move product into China. But again, certainly some of the uncertainty has been resolved with the agreement, but with the recent health issues within China, I think those uncertainties may be coming up again, unfortunately.
but we're not likely to see, because that would relate then to responses in commodity prices. Those aren't likely to soar, are they, Mykel? And therefore, there may be some management that's going to have to come to bear on the producer's part.
Oh, right. I mean, I've just finished a trip around the state, and I see a tremendous amount of grain that's still in storage and waiting to be sold. And we are, as Alan mentioned, we've had some favorable weather conditions which have contributed. It helps farmers to have grain, a lot of grain to sell at these commodity prices, but it doesn't help commodity prices when we've got a lot of grain to sell. So it's a catch-22 in that respect. So it's going to take a while to work through the supply of grain that we've got in order for commodity prices to rebound. So what do we do in the meantime? We really need to be watching, every penny and paying attention to everything that we're spending money on and how we're doing that. So really good farm management skills are going to be imperative right now. I've done a few lease meetings here and there, and I've talked to producers, and one of the things that they say is a strategy for them is talking to their landlords and trying to, keep rents from getting too high given the farm economy situation. And those are really important conversations to have and to keep your landowner informed of what's going on. So that's a strategy that a lot of folks are taking on.
Is there any reason to think that general farming expenses, inputs in particular, will be extra problematic this coming year? They were fairly well in check this past year comparatively. Alan?
I think if you look at farm input prices, I think you'll probably see some modest increases. But to me, I think it's going to be more on the output side as opposed to the input side in terms of certainly there's some things you can do perhaps to tightening those a little bit in terms of quantity use and in those types of issues. But I think Kansas farmers have adopted pretty well to those based on some of the past struggles. And so in this perspective, certainly looking at your input costs are going to be important, but I think the big thing is going to be on the output side, looking at quantity and then the price, I think, is really going to be the story in 2020.
And the underpinning, again, for a great lot of it is where land values go from here. Mykel, you've studied this ad nauseum for years and years, so if you were to look into your crystal ball, what are 2020 land price trends going to look like?
Well, you know that economists make weather people look good when it comes to our predictions, right?
Right.
Okay. So with that being said, I think there's the potential, if 2020 doesn't work out well for us, if our on the output side yields are not strong and prices don't recover, there's still the potential for some more loss of land value. I think when we look at where commodity prices are now and where profitability is right now for the average Kansas farm, land values are still a little high. Like I said, they've been very resilient given interest rates and given where we've been for profitability. So, things like the MFP payments, that can help support land values and rental rates. But when those things are temporary, they don't necessarily factor into those long-run land values. So I'm not saying that we're definitely going to lose more land value, but I think there's the possibility that could happen, yes.
I want to touch upon something that you did comment on in the article about producers having to sell land because of the economic state of affairs, but they are selling their lowest quality land first, and that's a trend you think might continue as well?
Well, that was an interesting thing that, the idea had kind of been presented to me while talking to folks around the state that part of that loan restructuring that we talked about a little while ago might involve selling off a parcel of land in order to kind of catch up with your debt payments. And when you ask a farmer to sell off a piece of land, they're going to go for their lowest quality ground first, their least productive ground first. Well, what was interesting when I was looking at the 2019 land sales was that I saw that there was a distinct decline in the average quality of land being sold statewide. And so it's possible that that's what's going on.
A prudent strategy on producers' part as far as making it through a tight situation then?
I think you really have to analyze every piece of ground that you farm and know the cost of production on every piece of ground. Because we can look at our land portfolio and we've got ground that we own and we've got ground that we rent. And it's been a reality that for some of us, we've been losing money on rented ground for several years now because we've locked ourselves into rental rates that are higher than what the profitability suggests they should be. But letting go of rented ground or selling off a piece of owned ground, those are tough decisions to make. They're not made lightly. And so you really need to make sure that you're getting rid of the piece of ground that has the most costs and the least productivity for your operation, and that you're keeping the pieces of ground that give you the most return.
Right. Well, Alan, it seems that producers the last several years have been going year to year, stage to stage, hoping for the turnaround. 2020 looks to be more of a holding on time. Is there in the further future that turnaround that may ease the pressure, to put it that way?
If you look at long-term population growth worldwide, if you look at the productivity, there is the possibility for profits to increase over time. And so if you look at the long-run picture, again, the demand and supply with increasing incomes worldwide does provide that opportunity. I think the big thing is just positioning your operation to get to those times where incomes will, again, recover. And part of it, I think, will be just taking a good look at kind of your cash flow and probably doing it for a multiple-year period, maybe look out 2-3 years and try to figure out what your cash needs are going to be. Certainly if you're going to restructure your operation by selling land or doing other major adjustments, I think you want to do that once. And so kind of looking for providing that cash for 2 to 3 years is probably something that I would encourage producers to think about.
And coupled with that, this is no time for producers to pull back on their working relationships with their lenders. If anything else, those need to be as tight as they ever have been.
Yes, in terms of communication with the lenders, communication, as Mykel indicated, with your landlords is just very, very important. I think transparency is going to be very important, such that there's a level of trust within that communication, and basically perhaps opening up the books and kind of sharing that information is probably a good way to think about moving forward.
Well, this article that you two have put together in a very concise and yet informative way captures a lot of what is going on out there in farm country around Kansas in as far as the economic status. So, Mykel, you would like to, in closing, ask producers to really review where they're at if they haven't been doing so on a fairly repetitive basis.
Yes. Again, just good record keeping, good farm management. That's what we need.
Be sure to take a look at the article and the accompanying graphs that they have that go with it, the Kansas Farm Economy, Navigating Rough Waters, authored by our guests. It is posted right there on the front of the agmanager.info website, agmanager.info. And the insight appreciated. Thanks to the both of you for coming over today.
You're welcome.
Along with us on this part of Agriculture Today, agricultural economists Mykel Taylor and Alan Featherstone of Kansas State University. Might pass along as well that a couple of Alan and Mykel's colleagues in that department have just posted something else on the Ag Manager site. Another handy tool for you producers to use as you go about your management. It's a farm income statement Excel spreadsheet, and it includes a cash only and an accrual adjustment statement for your use. It allows you to keep track of cash farm expenses, accrual adjustments, and depreciation. So, if you think that would be helpful to you for your farm management purposes, it's right there for the downloading at agmanager.info. You are tuned to Agriculture Today. Now this break. We'll return then with today's agricultural news headlines. Also standing by, Greg Akagi with this week's Kansas soybean update. And once more, our weekly horticulture segment is ahead, where we'll delve into landscape planning for the coming planting season. Still to come here on the K-State Radio Network. Please stay with us.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
This is Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network, now in our 96th year of broadcast service to agriculture. Eric Atkinson with you. Welcome back. Now today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. President Trump signed the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement at that White House ceremony yesterday, as you know. The USMCA, a significant political victory for the president, who noted in his comments that his critics had dismissed the possibility of renegotiating the former North American Free Trade Agreement. Here's more from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
President Trump presided over a ceremony at the White House to sign
the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Very special.
The three-way agreement, called the USMCA, replaces NAFTA.
And in a true sense, it's also a partnership with Mexico and Canada and ourselves against the world. It's really a trade partnership, if you look at it that way.
He says the agreement will add 1.2% to the country's GDP, and he calls the agreement a breakthrough for American agriculture.
Canada will finally provide greater access for American dairy. Canada's opening up. It will grow annual exports to our neighbors by an estimated $315 million. Poultry exports to Canada are expected to rise by at least 50%, and egg export could increase by 500%.
The deal also includes greater access for American-grown wheat to Canada. This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Reminding that USMCA is still waiting for ratification in Canada. The Canadian government just began the process of pushing for passage of that trade deal this week. Under NAFTA, trade in North America had grown to about $1.3 trillion annually between the three countries. USMCA is projected to add about $68 billion in U.S. exports once fully implemented, which would include about $2.2 billion for U.S. agriculture. The outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus in China has spawned talk of whether China can meet its purchases of U.S. agricultural goods under that Phase 1 agreement signed in mid-January. As for how high that focus is, the issue did come up while USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue held a telephone briefing with reporters from Italy to provide an update on his discussions this week with European Union officials. Asked of the China coronavirus situation and if it could impact the commodity purchase commitments, the Secretary said, quoting here, "We really don't know that yet. We would love and pray for a very quick resolution and conclusion to the coronavirus outbreak." Coronavirus, he went on to say, is obviously going to have some ramifications economy-wide, which, quoting him, "we hope will not inhibit the purchase goal that we have for this year." The focus on this issue is coming via the following provision in the language of the Phase 1 trade agreement that says, quoting, "In the event that a natural disaster or other unforeseeable event outside the control of the parties delays a party from timely complying with its obligations under this agreement, the parties shall consult with each other." Perdue did not say whether any such consultations have been requested on the part of China. And Corteva says it intends to speed sales of its proprietary genetically engineered seeds over the next 5 years while reducing its reliance on high-tech crop genes licensed from Bayer. Corteva is ramping up its production of its Enlist soybean seeds and related herbicide. The company is pitching the combination to farmers as a way to stop weeds such as Palmer amaranth and water hemp, which have evolved to withstand glyphosate. Bayer, since 2016, that is, has been marketing its own seed and spray combination called Extend, offering soybean and cotton seeds engineered to withstand dicamba. Corteva and other seed makers, including Syngenta, are major licensors of Bayer's Extend genes, paying Bayer royalties to insert those genes into their own seeds. Corteva early last year secured a final regulatory approval for its Enlist soybean seeds, now planning to reduce its reliance on its main arrival. Corteva says it expects its Enlist seeds to be planted on 20% of U.S. soybean acres this year. That would be double the company's previous estimate. By 2024, Corteva says it anticipates minimal use of Bayer's genes, conferring resistance to dicamba and glyphosate. That takes us up to time for this week's Kansas Soybean Update, and with that is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Caleb Little is joining us, Director of Communications with the National Biodiesel Board. And Caleb, you have had the ability and a lot of success in telling about the success of the biodiesel industry.
Yeah, we have. There's always something going on in biodiesel. Despite some challenges on some of the policy issues, we've had really great years and had a lot of really good successes from the environmental side to new fleets announcing their use of biodiesel. We put together a brand new website this year that helps get the information out. And
that ability to see that, and especially in these major metropolitan areas.
Yeah, so for those fleets, it's really easy. They want a cleaner, more environmentally sound product, more sustainable. And for them, they use so much diesel fuel in their equipment, heavy trucks, snow plows, garbage trucks, all those kinds of things. Anything you can think of, a city has those vehicles in their fleet. And for their users, it's turnkey. It's as easy as just using their regular petroleum diesel that they've done now. So from a user standpoint, it's so simple. Biodiesel is an easy choice.
The quality of the product as well, just constant improvements on getting that better quality biodiesel product out there too.
As the industry goes, the fuel quality standards have improved. Our producers have gotten bigger and better and more efficient. The ASTM standards that we've put in place for biodiesel, with the help of the soybean checkoff and their funding and research support, you can ensure that when you pull up to a pump and you get biodiesel at a retail station, it's going to work in your engine.
You talked about the website, brand new website, more information out there as well.
A big part of what we do is that education and outreach, just talking about the fuel, making it easier, increase awareness, makes it easier for our producers to go doing what they do and creating more fuel and more sustainable fuel options. And so a big part of that is online. So we have over 1 million page views a year on our information sources, biodiesel.org and nbb.org, the association site. And so it was time to bring some new technology to that, make it a little more streamlined, easier to use, easier to get that information out about the product. Soybean farmers essentially created the biodiesel industry back in the early 1990s to have a way to find some industrial use for soybean oil because there was such a glut. There's so much soybean oil on the market that they saw the opportunity and invested in the industry. And soybean farmers still support the National Biodiesel Board with checkoff dollars for research and education and promotion and those kinds of things. So we wouldn't be a nearly 3 billion gallon a year industry without the help and support of soybean farmers.
That is Caleb Little, Director of Communications with the National Biodiesel Board. He joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Greg Akagi there. Many thanks, Greg. We'll be back on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Closing out this Agriculture Today, it's our weekly horticulture segment. Once more, we're offering some thoughts as we look ahead to the spring season, which will eventually get here. We're drawing closer week by week, and this time focusing on landscape improvement planning. Joining us via phone is Dennis Patton. Dennis is the Research and Extension Horticulture Agent in Johnson County. And you don't go about landscaping as a homeowner willy-nilly here. There needs to be some level of thought put into this, certainly, Dennis.
That's correct. It's an investment, both of your time and your money. And so winter, when we can't do much outside, it's a good time to, when you're driving up to the house, whatever, taking a walk, just give a really critical look to your house and just kind of say, is this saying the type of house, what I want it to say, are the plant materials looking tired, overgrown, run down? What does our house say to the people that drive up and down the street, the road, walk by our house? Does it really project the image of what we really want it to say? And that's what I call the curb appeal. A nice landscaped home can increase the value of it. All sorts of data research shows that homes that have a nice, pleasing approach sell faster than those that do not. So there's just all sorts of reasons why we want to spiff up that curb appeal.
So if one is going to seriously assess their current landscape situation and look at plant material that may be waning, what's the best tip-off for knowing that shrub, that bush, that tree should be replaced?
Sometimes I think you just know it. You just don't want to admit it. It's the shrub that keeps growing too big. You keep whacking it back. You always have to cut it back. Or on the other hand, you cut it back so many times, it just kind of looks like, death warmed over. It's just seen better days. And, a lot of shrubs, people don't want to hear this, but a lot of shrubs after 10 plus years, they're mature. They're in their old age. They've kind of done the peak of their life. And sometimes they just need to be freshened up. And also, shrubs can date your home, too. Much like the carpet you pick or the color of your appliances or the color of the walls, your shrubs also can date the home, too, as when they were trendy or popular. And so sometimes, like I said, it's just good to have that facelift.
All right. Well, then, if one's going about that facelift, if they're going to make some significant changes in plant material, they need to follow some rules of landscape layout to some degree, don't they?
That's correct. There's several really easy guidelines I like for people to follow and help avoid mistakes. One is what I call the 1/3 rule. And by that I mean about 1/3 of the plant material in the front of the house should be evergreen. That way you have year-round color, year-round interest, but then you also have the other 2/3 of the plant material to have different forms, textures, flowers, fall color, really to create a lot of interest. And the other mistake a lot of people make is planting too close to the home. They shove those little plants right up next to the foundation, and then it's hard to get to the house to trim them, to paint the house, just do general maintenance upkeep, or they rub against the siding and cause damage. And so the other rule I like for people to follow is the 1/2 + 1 foot rule. So that means if a shrub spreads 5 feet, you plant it 2.5 feet plus 1 foot, so 3.5 feet from the house, so 1/2 their spread plus 1 foot rule, and that way that the shrub doesn't rub up against the house, and you get behind there to do general maintenance and routine chores. And there's one other really good rule, too, and that is the height rule. If you've got windows and you don't want to get out there shearing and pruning back, only select shrubs that maximum height is lower than the windows of your house. That'll save you a lot of time and effort and energy because now you don't have to prune to keep them in bounds.
You have to think ahead.
That's
and
right.
Not just a week or 2 or a month, 10 years ahead perhaps even.
Yes. Those little plants in the little 1 or 2 gallon containers that may be the size of a basketball, it's hard to believe in 5 years that could be 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide. It's just how robust plants grow when they're well established and really like their climate and spot.
Well, as important as anything, though, Dennis, is being sure that one selects plant material, whatever ornamental plant they're picking, that is well adapted to Kansas growing conditions. That is absolutely paramount.
That is correct. When you've got, 20, 30 inches of rainfall difference between one part of the state to the other, we're not all going to be planting the same plants in eastern Kansas or western Kansas. So we need to look for those plants that are more durable, heat, drought tolerant in your location. And of course, then we always look for our cold hardiness map. For the most part, Kansas is a zone 6 climate. So we want to grow plants that are hardy to a lower number. So we don't want to avoid plants like zone 7, 8 that could winter kill when we have our extreme Kansas winters.
Now, you use the zone ratings, and those are depicted on the plant itself at the retail outlet, right?
That's correct. Yeah, they're going to be on the tag, on the information that says hardiness zone or zone whatever. And like I said, most of Kansas is Zone 6 throughout. There is a little tip of Zone 7 down there in, far south central Kansas, Kiowa, Medicine Lodge, my stomping grounds, Caldwell gets into Zone 7 a little bit, but most of Kansas is a 6 zone.
So that is an important guideline. But any particular sources of information that you would advise homeowners check into in as far as plant material, shopping around, if you will?
I always say you go to your K-State Extension office because we have a number of different fact sheets on recommended trees, shrubs for our area in our publication library that will give you a great place to start looking for plants that are durable, plants that are well recommended for the state of Kansas.
And then start piecing things together. That's almost a jigsaw puzzle approach here, but take the time to do just that.
Mm-hmm. And, probably a bad idea before you go out shopping for plant materials, either snap a few pictures on your phone, do a little drawing, so when you get to the garden center and you start looking at that plant, you can start figuring out, okay, that plant can only be 4 foot high because of the window, and, it's going to spread 4 foot, so it's a 10-foot space, so I probably need 3 of those plants in there. And that helps us just utilize our resource a lot better so we don't overbuy or buy the wrong plant. And here again, we're not building a bridge, we're not building a skyscraper, we're just doing a simple landscape plan, and sometimes close is better than not knowing at all, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, this is a great time to start pulling those thoughts together. What you want in a landscape makeover, start getting some ideas of what will work to suit your landscape design purpose. And again, as Dennis says, your local extension office or the extension resources online have loads of information for you to rely on. Dennis, thanks so much for the input right here.
Eric, thanks so much.
Dennis Patton with us. Dennis is the Research and Extension Horticulture Agent based in Johnson County, Northeast Kansas, on this week's K-State Horticulture segment. Our thanks to you for being along with us, and please rejoin us this same time tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.